Some stories exist to enlighten the mind, some to temporarily inspire hope or passion. But there is one set of writings meant to chill you to the bone, or make you question what is actually possible. These stories are called creepypasta. I'm your average American. I have a social security number, pay my taxes, and help my landlady carry out her garbage. And yeah, I've seen The Matrix. I'm popular at work, and when I go to the grocery store, I'm just another guy, buying groceries. But at the end of the day, when most people go home to their family or whatever semi-significant thing awaits them, whether it's a creature they've enslaved as a companion or a television show that's rotting their brain, I'm taking the time to do something truly gratifying. I watch. Windows. It's nice to have a view or emergency exit, but they also make a person vulnerable. Most people don't think about it. I know this because most people don't have curtains, and if they do, they're usually wide open, at least a few, and you can see a lot of shit through a few windows. Things you wouldn't find in your worst nightmares. The evil that lives within every box with a door. Take a peek one night. You'd never know that Dr. Smith 2 doors down beats his son every night with a belt. His son that's 46 years old and a paraplegic. Or Mrs. Bailey across the street. How could you smile and wave when she's watering her garden after knowing it's her 2 ex-husbands fertilizing the soil? You're thinking I'm exaggerating, and I don't blame you. Most people can't fathom the amount of heinousness in the world, but take it from someone who knows. People are fucked up. Invasion of privacy? Maybe. But if it is, then it is also when you simply look across the street at your neighbor's house. When you glance at someone jogging and stare a little bit too long. I just get a closer look. Trespassing? Sometimes, what can I say? But I guarantee if given the opportunity, you'd take a glance into a certain someone's window. For pleasure or resentment. We're only human. Sometimes you just have to create the opportunity. Let me ask you, what's wrong with it? Watching people. I'm not like the sick fuck 2 states over that's raping middle-aged blonde women because he has a mommy complex. And the ones of you using the word stalker, you can shut the hell up now. I know nothing about these people aside from what I see through a rectangle. A glass barrier that I would never cross. Unless I had to. Which brings me to my story. Now, I stand behind my stalker statement. But I do have a few windows I find particularly entertaining. Some I've watched for a while. One every night maybe. But never in a malicious manner. I just observe, and whatever these people put on show for the world is their prerogative. Don't blame me for having eyeballs. Her name was Clara. At least, that's what I named her. Like I said, I know nothing about the people I watch except what I see, so sometimes I make up names like Clara and even give backstories. But Clara, I watched her long enough that I basically knew her backstory. Single mother, without custody of her son, probably for popping pills due to how many pills she popped. A slight alcohol addiction, and lays on the floor when Jehovah's Witness knocks on her door because they often look in windows and she knows they'll keep knocking if they see her. That's what's funny. You notice how exposing the window is when God comes knocking, but leave it open for a world made of eyes that hide in the darkness, and not just mine. Countless creatures lurk outside the confines of whatever box you live in. The difference between me and them is most of them want in. The hardest decision I've ever had to make is whether or not I should intervene when observing situations that absolutely need to be stopped. Whether or not I should play the extended hand of fate and stop whatever tragedy that would inevitably happen if not for my own misdeeds. Whether or not I should watch or leave. You're probably hoping I'm some window-peeking vigilante, resolving domestic disputes in a single bound. But that's not the case. The truth is, I'm not a vigilante. I'm not Superman, and I'm definitely not God, so who am I to change what I feel needs to be changed? To redirect the timeline that would otherwise never exist. Maybe the wife I saw murdered and chopped up worked for a tech company, and if not for her untimely demise, an AI machine uprising would trigger the apocalypse, so it was just her time to go. If there is a God, who am I to change what he himself doesn't deem worthy to alter? So I'll watch. Or not. One thing's for sure. The longer I do this, the easier it is to not look away. That's why, a few months ago when witnessing my first home invasion murder, it didn't faze me quite like it would have if I hadn't already seen a man that would bring home a kitten every Monday night to repeatedly strangle it within a breath from its death, just to let it gasp back to life, only to set it ablaze in a metal bucket. To see the things I've seen is to give your soul away, piece by piece. It changes a person. So I kept my distance when I saw the figure emerge from the woodline on its way to the blue bungalow I'd been watching for about an hour or two. It walked right in the back door into the newlyweds' house. I could tell because of the cans on the back of the car, plus the wedding dress was a dead giveaway. I decided to leave the bush I'd gotten comfortable in and got within feet, circling the house, watching as this entity navigated the dark corridors, making its way into the bathroom, the couple still consummating their marriage down the hall. And there it waited. What was I gonna do? Break into these people's house and attack someone hiding in their shower? That'd be an easy one to explain. Either way, when the couple finished, the girl was the one who rushed to the bathroom first. Before she could even turn on the light, I heard it. The sound of the shower curtain ripping open, a sound I'll never forget, followed by the second sound I'll never forget. The cracking sound that ended the woman's shriek for help. The man rushed down the hall into the bathroom where I saw a struggle of shadows, ending in the same cracking sound. The figure stood over the bodies for a good while, 5 or 10 minutes, before bending down and performing some unknown deed, then rising to his feet. Gracefully, as if without moving a muscle, it glides down the hall and out the back door, not even caring to shut it. Now, I know I said I wasn't a stalker, but all things considered, I saw no harm in just falling behind and seeing where this person went. So I did. Not to sound more creepy than I probably already do, but it was easy to keep my distance and eye on the figure making its way through the woods with my night vision binoculars. To be honest, for a guy who spends most of his time in the shadows of the trees, I was terrified. As I made my way through the woods, following the figure, it may not make sense, but I'd never felt so much darkness. And other than my footsteps that I desperately tried to keep quiet, all I heard was silence. Suddenly, through the lens, the figure disappeared into a darkness that I soon found was the entrance of a cave. Now obviously I'm not dumb enough to follow this person into a cave, so I found a tree at a safe distance to watch from. Not to sound more creepy than I probably already do, but I used my extra long belt just for this occasion and tied myself in just in case I nodded off. I watched the dark entrance for hours until finally I fell asleep. The next thing I remember was the sun heating up my face and the birds chirping. Then, the sound of bark being ripped from the tree as something made its way up to me. I frantically undid my belt and positioned my balance to look down and see a massive black bear. He looked up in mid-climb and stopped as we locked eyes. In that split second, I truly felt as though this was a complete coincidence. That the cluster of atoms that made up this tree was just a random crossing point for me and this bear. That my existence was just a surprise to him as his was to me. After a long stare, I didn't move a muscle as this calm beast made its way back down the trunk and through the brush, looking back only once to reassure itself that I wasn't following, and then left. Waking up to fear is the worst feeling in the world. Unconsciousness is the most vulnerable a person can be, and to come out of it in the middle of danger is soul-shattering. I climbed down from the tree and got the fuck out of the woods. I went home and watched the news channel all day until finally the story I was waiting for flashed across the screen. Couple murdered. Reason unknown. They go on to say what I already know. That there was no sign of forced entry. That the back door was open and unlocked, and that their bodies were found in the bathroom. I needed to know what he did, what that sound was, and then they said it. Victims had had their lower jaw ripped from their body. The most disturbing part was that they weren't found at the scene, meaning he took them with him. I followed the sick fuck through the woods as he carried severed jaws. I promptly stumbled to the bathroom and threw up my guts, then caught a single breath before dry heaving for 2 minutes straight. Even doing what I do, what are the odds I'd come across something of pure horror? When I could finally pull my face out of the toilet, I staggered back to my television to learn everything else I could about the monster I'd come so close to. I learned that people had been sporadically murdered, or almost murdered, by having their jaw ripped off for centuries. Yeah, some people fucking survived. Whoever started that method of murder was a fucked up individual. The segment ends by stating that the police had no leads, but were still processing evidence found at the scene. Now, I can't imagine a divine creator that would create me, a person compelled to watch others from the shadows, for the sole purpose of stopping those in the night whom mean to do harm to others. But, hypothetically, if an entity that created the universe does have that kind of fucked up sense of humor, who am I to go against my reason for being? So I did the only safe thing I could think of, which was to write an anonymous letter to the police, outlining what I knew about this person in the cave. After dropping the letter in the box outside the post office, I truly felt as though I'd made the best and only decision that didn't disrupt my life. And then I kept on living it. Weeks passed and the news stories kept coming. Elderly woman, murdered. A man and a son, killed. All coming to their end in the same barbaric way. One after the other. I don't know if the police thought my letter was bogus or maybe just couldn't find the cave, but either way, we officially had a serial killer in my town. As crazy as that sounds, believe it or not, it was easy to forget that. You never knew if there was going to be another murder, so after a week or two, it would slip from your mind until reality would come crashing down after catching the nightly news. This was around the same time Claire had got some sort of night job or gig where she was gone 2 or 3 nights a week. So I had to fill that time with watching randoms, which is fine, I do it all the time. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss Clara. I know how that looks. I've made my peace with it. I'm a weirdo. A fucking freak who watches a girl every night through a window. Too afraid to talk to her because I've lived in the shadows so long. What's the point in letting anyone see me now? Anyway, the more I watched random windows I've never looked through before, the more people I saw as victims of this monster. A mom and dad playing Scrabble with their kids. I pictured the door, left wide open, then panned back to the window, only to find the family with their lower parts of their faces missing. Eventually I saw it everywhere. The murders became more frequent, and even a second occasion where it happened on the same night, in the same neighborhood that I was watching in. Not only was this person killing with no rhyme or reason, but they were putting me with my nightly activities at risk. My only option was to take care of it myself. It's a funny feeling when you decide to kill someone, wholeheartedly intend on taking someone's life, even a monster like this. Kinda like you weigh less, but emotionally. Probably because you've given part of your soul away. I was definitely curious at how I'd feel after the deed was done. I knew it was something I couldn't come back from, that it would change me. But I also knew it had to be done, no matter how much of my soul I had to give away. I decided my best plan of action was the rifle my grandfather had left me. It wasn't an antique, but it definitely wasn't new, not to mention I'd never fired a gun. My biggest strength is stealth, and hoped when combined with the element of surprise plus a gun, it would be enough. It had to be. I made my way back to the newlyweds' house where it all started, where their life together began and ended in the same night. The question I asked myself as I passed the blue bungalow was, could I have stopped it? If not saved them, at least the 12 victims after. I pushed the question to the back of my mind as I entered the forest. The sky was clear, leaving the cosmos exposed and allowing the moon to shine down, lighting up the forest even though it was just God's little thumbnail. I found it easy to navigate back through the woods, down the valley and over the creek, right back to the tree I'd fled from not that long ago. I ran my fingers down the deep rips in the bark, envious of the type of power I'd never have. Power that would be useful now if the 3 shots I have fail. I decided to get a little closer this time. My plan was, assuming this person still used this cave, was to wait until I saw him leave, then enter the cave and find a vantage point to take this person out from. I found the type of bush that's good to hide a man my size, and it just so happened to be directly across from the entrance. After what felt like hours, I heard a tapping coming from the cave, which turned into an echoey pound. I took these as footsteps and readied my gun even though it wasn't the plan. My body shook as I mentally prepared to do what I knew was right, what had to be done. I was shaking to the point that the loose metal pieces on the rifle were making an obvious, audible sound. I slowed my breathing and composed myself as the echoes continued to escape the entrance. And then I saw him. He was bigger than his silhouette looked. Well over 6 feet and walked with his head hung, making him appear to be hunchback, but I could tell wasn't the case. He hung his arms down the length of his body without movement, like he was being controlled by a lazy puppet master. His slow stride would have made it easy for anyone to pull the trigger, anyone who had experience with a gun, that is. I couldn't afford to waste any of my 3 chances, so I lowered the gun as he disappeared into the woods. Part of me hated myself for not attempting it, but me hitting him from that distance was a long shot, literally, so I let the thought go. He was gone, but I knew he was going to kill. I couldn't stew on that fact. As I'd witnessed firsthand, he's quick with his work, so I knew I didn't have long to position myself where he'd never expect me. So I made my way towards the entrance of the cave. Upon entering, I was met with a stale, musty smell you'd expect from a cave, but there was a hint of something else that I couldn't put my finger on. The smell became more putrid the further I went into the earth. The cave was simple. It didn't have magnificent stalagmites or anything you'd see in a movie, just rock walls and dirt. Soon, I saw the flickering of what appeared to be candles in the distance, accompanied by that smell that had gotten so strong I was gagging. The closer I got, the more I could tell that they were arranged in a way that would lead anyone to believe it was religious in meaning. Then, I saw what was positioned in the center, as if offerings to some sick god of sorts. Severed jaws, teeth, gum, flesh, arranged and rotting. It was so impossible to look at. I couldn't stand being near it. The more I examined the cave, the more I realized there was no vantage point. Nothing to hide behind or up on to catch this person off guard. If anything, I'd cornered myself. I was confident I had time to get the fuck out before he came back, but I had to go right then. Once I was back out into the fresh air, I formulated another plan. Go back to my bush and wait until he comes back. Then just approach this sick fuck and fire when I was close enough. After waiting and waiting, I made the stupid mistake of falling asleep. I woke up due to the horrible taste in my mouth. Before even opening my eyes, I realized my mouth was being forced open. The image I saw when I came to will haunt my subconscious until the day I die. This man's face, inches from my own, has his fingers wrapped around my teeth. The smell of his breath was overwhelming, but his stare into my eyes were the only thing I could focus on. I felt as though his eyes were staring into my soul, as his grip strengthened and slowly started to separate my mouth even further, past the point it naturally opens, until he cocked his head without breaking eye contact, as if he was listening to something behind him. "The Dark One doesn't command it," he said. "He knows who you are. He knows all. You're the one who watches." Those words really resonated as I felt the pressure release from his disgusting fingers, and he simply stood up and walked into the woods. I couldn't move. I now knew what my body would do in the event of facing pure terror. Not a goddamn thing. I looked for the rifle to find it twisted and bent in a way that made no fucking sense. What was this guy? Who's the Dark One and how does he know about me? Is this guy just fucking crazy? My main question was, what else did he know? There was only one place I felt I needed to be, so I rushed to Clara's. Upon arriving, I noticed the back door, wide open. My stomach dropped. I scanned the house, and in her bedroom window was an oddly shaped silhouette, waving at me. Without even thinking, I rushed in to instantly see the man, trying to position his fingers in between Clara's grit teeth. He fish-hooked her cheeks, causing her to scream, letting him get between her teeth, where he started to separate. As if by instinct, I quickly grabbed him from behind in an inexperienced chokehold. I didn't know what I was doing, and I could tell it wasn't doing shit. He continued to separate her mouth, but her resistance was just enough. Then, he started laughing. I noticed him staring across the room, and then I see it. The shadow in the corner, just standing there. With no option left, I placed my fingers in his mouth in mid-laugh and start to pull. I started to feel less and less resistance. Soon, I was stretching his mouth so far that he was forced to let go of Clara and reach for my hands. But in that split second, it gave way. The cracking sound I'd thought so long about. His body hit the floor, and I instantly looked back towards the corner to find it empty. By this time, Clara was hysterical. I knew she wouldn't feel comfort from a stranger's embrace, so I just assured her that everything was safe now and that I was calling the cops. I told them I entered the house after hearing screams, and then described the scene exactly how it happened, with the exception of the shadow that seemed to disappear with the life of this man. After police interviews and other situations causing me and Clara to be near one another, something happened that I didn't expect. We began dating, and now even live together. Her real name is Bridget, and her son's name is Tyler. I still watch randoms a few nights a week, but I've had to cut that down so Bridget doesn't get suspicious. What worries me most is the shadows come back. I catch it out of the corner of my eye and sometimes hear whispers, especially when I'm out watching. It's like it's constantly over my shoulder, putting thoughts in my mind, thoughts I'd never have on my own. And I'm worried about where these thoughts will take me. I'm not really a peeping Tom, but I do hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, hit the subscribe button and bell notification, and leave a comment on whether or not this was the most messed up story you'd ever heard. Also, follow me on Twitter. I think I'm kind of funny, and I'll see you next time.